Darren, I am so happy that you're here today to join on the first one of the Recall Mike show.
Thank you for having me. This is super exciting. I'm glad to be a part of this.
Yeah, well, we thought it was really important to be able to express ourselves, with knowing that the media won't always cover it. People will be wondering, well, what are those people doing in the who are trying to recall Mike Bonin? What are they doing? How do they spend their days? Who are they really? And it was very important. I think you share that, right?
Yeah, you're in Venice. I'm in Brentwood. We're both, residents of CD11. So we have a lot of shared interests, but we're also very different. So it's a big group of people that have very similar interests, but also very dissimilar. So
that's right. So it was our way of, we're working hard to try to build community.
Yes.
So I want to tell you some of the stuff we got up. We start by, and we're going to start almost every week, talking to the people who are behind Recall Bonin, with Nicole Rudderman and Katrina Schmidt, who are both the board members, and they explain what has happened last week and what we can expect this week. After that, we're going to move to a spotlight on a part of the district, and that is Westchester. And we have someone talking about what's going on in Westchester Park. And we have another resident who's talking about what's going on with the RVs parked on Manchester. Just a part of
town. That's exciting. I can't wait to hear about that.
Yeah, well, he's got some real strong opinions. That'll be Scott Gilliam. And we also then go to the next section that we have. We're going to call it Hometown Heroes. And ironically, and maybe not ironically, maybe not even coincidentally, the two that we're going to focus on this week both happen to be in Venice Beach. One is named Sean Stern. He's going to talk about Oceanfront Walk. And our friend Philip Lund is going to talk about what happened in East Venice and some of the research that he's been doing about encampments that I think people who are interested in what's going on in CD11 will be interested in for sure.
Definitely.
And then after that, we're going to do a section. We're going to feature one volunteer, because this whole effort that we're doing means nothing without the volunteers who got out there trying to get signatures.
Exactly.
And we found one woman this week that definitely wanted to do our first shout out. And one other really terrific person is coming on to talk with us. One section we got called Say What? And when we talk to really some of the top journalists in our town here who have been covering issues, and we'll be talking to Chris LeGray from the All Aspect Report, and he'll be talking to us about arson in the canyon. But I understand you have actually been thinking a lot about the recall and things we're going through, and wrote down some of your thoughts. So would love to hear it. So thanks, Darren. What's going on?
I do want to point out that I'm not a professional newscaster, so it might sound like I'm reading this, and I kind of am, but these are some of my thoughts on recalls. So, people often ask, isn't a recall an extreme measure? The answer is no. California is one of many states that affords its citizens the direct right of action in government. For example, to bypass an often cumbersome legislative process, Californians can exercise their right to place a proposition on a ballot and achieve a legislative outcome by direct popular vote. Similarly, California allows its citizens to take direct action and remove an elected official who has lost the public's trust. Recalls became fashionable during the progressive populist period in American history shortly after the turn of the 20th century and became part of Article 2 of the California Constitution in 1911. Interestingly, the founders debated inserting a recall provision in the U.S. Constitution, but James Madison was against direct democracy, so we were left instead with the impeachment process that we are all too familiar with now. In California, since 1913, there have been 179 recall attempts of state elected officials. 11 of those 179 recall efforts collected enough signatures to qualify for the ballot, and of those, 6 recall efforts were successful, most notably in 2004, when Arnold Schwarzenegger was elected in that recall election that ended then-Governor Gray Davis's political career. 19 states now have provisions allowing for the recall of statewide office holders, and approximately 30 states allow for the recall of local elected officials. So recall is not a new process. It has been used across the country, and it is not extreme.
That was great, Darren, and it really inspires me to do my own op-ed. But first, let's talk to the founders of Recall. Nico Rudderman, Katrina Schmidt. And I'm speaking with the people who are at the top of the food chain. And I want to welcome you both, Katrina Schmidt and Nico Rudderman, to the Recall Mike podcast. How are we doing this morning?
Good morning, Chuck.
Great. We're doing great.
Well, great. We had a good weekend. So let's start by talking about what's happened so far in terms of getting signatures, finding volunteers. It's a Herculean task. How you guys doing?
So last week, we started distributing all of our petitions, and we've gotten out over 300 petition booklets to over 100 volunteers all across the district. We have our network of volunteers getting really excited, really enthusiastic, and we're just growing and growing. So I think we're off to a really good start.
And it's the entire council district. So, you know, one of the misnomers would be, oh, these are just some rowdy people in Venice doing this. But that indeed is not true, is it?
Not at all. We have a lot of people in the Palisades, in Brentwood, Mar Vista, Westchester, Playa del Rey. Where else am I missing? Marina del Rey.
Mar Vista.
The whole district.
Yeah, everywhere but Chatsworth, because it's not in CD11, of course. But everywhere else, we are really covered. Yeah. And now is it there's some way that you can even you put your signature and do it electronically? You don't even have to have somebody say you want to recall Bonin and write it on the book, or is there a way to do that yet, or are we moving in that direction?
No, there's no way to sign electronically, and there was a change.org petition that's been going around for about a year to recall Mike Bonin, and it got over 17,000 signatures, which is about half of what we need, and it's great. A lot of people sign that, but the problem is a lot of people think that they've now signed the petition, and they haven't. It has to be wet ink on paper on our official petitions that were approved by the city clerk. So we're trying to get the word out to those people that have signed that sign again.
That's right. In fact, we're hoping that some of the people who started those change.orgs will actually notify those who sign that this is where the action is. And I know we'll get many from that as well. What else can you share with us right now? What's going on in the week?
Well, we've passed out over 300 books, and there's 50 signatures in a book. We have over 100 volunteers who have already come and gotten books, and we're looking for more. We need as many people out there as possible, just spreading the word. And it's been pretty remarkable. I know the last recall in 2017 that there wasn't as much push behind it because it was really about some real local issues. But this year Mike has managed to anger pretty much his entire district. So we have a lot of enthusiasm in every single neighborhood in CD11.
And one of the things about our recall, it's the independent one. We're the one. We've had 7 years of watching Mike not represent us and make broken promises to us. Which makes us different than some of the other citizens and residents who are not happy with their representation either. But we're completely autonomous. Is that right?
Yeah, I think one thing that's really been important to us as we started this and as we continue growing this effort is that this is a nonpartisan campaign, and we're all about sort of like coming together on this one issue. We know we need to get them out. There's been so much divisiveness, especially the previous 4 years. And this is one thing that we can all agree on, that we need them out, and we don't want to make it partisan.
But the one thing before even we sign off, there are events where people can go to actually sign, places, right, that are there every day, that if you're driving by and think, hey, isn't that Arbor in Venice? I can go sign there.
Yeah, we have a list of permanent locations, businesses that have offered us their locations to hold petitions where people can go sign. And then we also have volunteers who are out there doing pop-up signings every day. Today, I just took one of our stars, Oz, and dropped her off in front of Lincoln Hardware, and she's going to be there for 3 hours on Lincoln collecting signatures, and that's her new pop-up. So you can go to our link tree and see where these locations are.
And we also need more volunteers. So go to our website. There's a place where you can sign up to volunteer. Also, if you go to the signatures page on our website, There's instructions for signing up to be a signature gatherer, and we're all volunteer right now. We don't have any paid signature gatherers. This is a totally grassroots movement, and we need help. We need all your help.
And here's two things to know. One is that on our podcast, we have going to be having a segment each week called Hometown Heroes, and the first one is Oz King, and we have that segment will be coming up. The other is what you said about getting the volunteers. This is volunteers will be able to have complete access to this show and explain why they decided to sign this recall petition. We want to hear from you. They want to hear from you. Stop, being alone in your room. Come on out and play. As they said in Cabaret. Hi, I know you were expecting someone from Westchester, not the old guy from Venice, but a terrific article has just come out and circling the news by Sue Pascal about the Westchester Park, which is what we were just talking about in our spotlight piece. And there were just a few quotes in this article I felt you should hear before we hear our expert on fellow resident down there in Westchester, Jim McCafferty. The Delray Little League, which generally has 310 players, was told in February this year there would be no permits because of safe parking program in the parking lot where the Little League field is. League officials acknowledged that because of homeless, parents do not want their children to use the park. That league also called Bonin's office about security, but were turned down. The article goes on to explain that the swimming pool is open, but they only have a few swimmers because parents don't feel safe taking their kids through the parking lot filled with homeless people. This is the issue of our time in Westchester, and we have two people to be talking about it right now, Jim McCafferty and Scott Gilliam. Hi, Jim. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming on our weekly recall. This is our premiere podcast, so we're really appreciative that we're talking about that you came on and that we're talking about Westchester Rec Center. When you think of Westchester, you're part of town. Of course, there's the airport, and you've got some your school system, of course, but you've got some notable colleges. You have Loyola Marymount, of course, on the top of the hill, Otis Art Center, and others. But when I growing up here as a native, when I would think of Westchester, I would think of the awesome athletics that had been there for 30, 40 years. And the epicenter of that is Westchester Park. Am I right about that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate you taking time to discuss it. It's near and dear to my heart. It's just down the street from where I live. So it's really important. And it's just a shame to see what's happened to that park. I've been here for 20 years in LA in Westchester. And, it was a great place, to raise a family, having kids, taking kids to the park when they were little, playing on the playground. They did a nice job with the skate park that's over there. And, you got the rec center, the senior center, all types of activities going on over there. Softball, baseball, basketball.
You got a driving range too, yeah?
Yeah. The driving range is right there. You got Westchester golf course right next to it. You have the tennis courts also right there as well.
Yeah, so people use it. So chances are, you let's say 2 years ago, you're there with your boys and they're young teens, right? And
my daughter's 14 and my son's 11.
So there you go. That age of athletics is there and youth sports. But in earlier times that you go there, would it be the kind of thing you would be walking them? You and your wife would be walking them. I see you got your doggy behind you, and you'd run into friends. I mean, that was the point. Everybody knew at some point you'd be at that park.
Oh yeah, I mean, we had birthday parties there. You take the kids. It was a great place to fly a kite. We'd take the kids to fly kites because there's always a little windy over there, plenty of open space. And you just see a lot of people out there. There, barbecues there, people grilling, playing music. All the sports were there. I used to coach flag football for NFL Flag LA. And, I held all my practices there because, again, it was the only place locally that we could go and just grab a section of field and start doing a practice. We didn't need a permit. We didn't have to schedule any times or anything. We could just coordinate with the team and say, hey, meet there and we'll find a section of the park to use. That was the best part about it.
Yeah. So That's not going on these days?
Oh, God, no. Now with the homeless situation that's over there, the parking lot's taken over. There's a swimming pool over there too. I have no idea if that's ever going to come back. The whole area is just lined with tents from end to end. Every day there's more. It started with 10 or 20 and then 50, and now I got to say there's probably over 100, 150 tents at this point. And it's all over the park. It's literally from end to end.
So from what your observation is too, it's not that these are your neighbors who live or live a mile away and got behind in their rent to an apartment and got nowhere to go and ended up in the park. These are people who've come from outside of Westchester, outside of Los Angeles, as it were.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's the few cases here and there of the down and outs, but it's definitely a destination. It's become a destination now, and that's the scary part. Like I said, it started with just a few, and now it's 100 plus. More coming every day. So it's scary, and like I said, it's over by the tennis courts, it's the parking lots, it's the pool. Bonin has his office over there. Councilman Mike Bonin's office. They're all around his building. The senior center was totally inundated. It's a square building. The whole building was wrapped around and fully encased with tents.
Are people scared of crime? Quite bluntly.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, I personally, I'm not taking my kids over there. I'm not even taking my dog over there. And it's really sad. And I mean, there's been 2 shootings in the last 2 weeks. The last one was really bad. I had a coworker of mine. Her and her boyfriend were over at the driving range at the time that the shooting happened. And she said if anybody was walking up to the driving range at that point, they would have been hit, because she said she heard the bullets whiz by her head.
Oh my.
Yeah, and that was just last week.
How is this impacting your kids? How do they do? They're 14, 11?
Yeah, it's really sad. I mean, they just in the past, year and a half, they used to ride their bikes around here all the time. They'd go to the park. They'd take the dog to the park. We'd do football over there. Like I said, softball. We'd go over there and just practice. If they had a tryout or something, we'd go. That's where we went to go throw the ball around and just practice. We can't do any of that anymore. You go over to the softball field or the baseball field where the bleachers are. You got people sleeping on the bleachers. You got people that have thrown tarps and tents over the bleachers and are sleeping underneath the bleachers, pushing their tents right up to the fence. I mean, the last time I went there was probably, 8 months ago. I went with my daughter to practice softball. And when we got there, we walked through the whole park. The whole time I'm looking over my shoulder, making sure nobody's following us. We get over to the softball field. There's about 5 tents right along the base path, So we kind of come in from the outfield, go on, we start running around, warming up. Right behind home plate, there's a tent with a guy half sleeping in the tent, half sleeping out of the tent with his pants around his ankles. Just face down. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, let's get out of here. So we left. And it's really sad. My kids won't even ride their bikes anymore. I mean, they're afraid to go around the neighborhood. They used to go to the Starbucks over there. There's a Subway nearby. They won't go over there anymore because right behind the Subway and the Starbucks, there's a huge encampment over there. And there's always, crazy homeless people shouting at you and walking in the middle of the street and causing a problem. And so my kids are afraid to go over there. They won't go to Westchester Park. I wouldn't allow them to go over there anymore. Even just walking down to the end of the street, if they take my dog on a walk every night, they're carrying mace at, 14 and 11 years old. They're carrying mace and trying to protect themselves because they're worried.
I'm so sorry. This is how this has impacted your family and your entire community. Do you where do you go now to throw the ball around? I mean, is there you have to get in your car and drive to another neighborhood?
No, I mean, we kind of rely on, the organizations that we're with. Delray American Little League is great. They have 2 fields, one here in Westchester, one down by the beach. And even down by the beach, Playa del Rey, that field, I mean, it's a great, beautiful field. but it has its issues. You see a lot of homeless try to set up shop down there at the lagoon. Luckily when everything kind of started coming out of COVID and the sports started opening up again, a lot of the parents were kind of able to dissuade these people from setting up camp right near the parks there. But really with COVID and shutdown and not having kids over there playing and not having parents there to kind of police it, I think that really opened up Pandora's box to just this free for all of camp wherever you want, do whatever you want, and there's going to be no repercussions. So that's what's sad. And I reach out to Mike Bonin's office quite a bit, and in one of the emails that I sent to him, I said, hey, you got to get these places back open. You got to get the sports going again for kids, because without the sports, you don't have the kids there. You don't have the parents there. And then, like I said, you're opening up Pandora's box and you're allowing a free for all. At least, when the parents are there, we're able to, protect the kids. We're able to protect our park and our neighborhoods. And that, year of shutdown just really, really hurt that. So.
Final question for you, Jim. When you wrote those emails out to Mr. Bonin, did you get a reply? Did you call his office? Did anyone, his staffers, did Mr. Bonin get back to you? Anyone?
No, I mean, every once in a while, Hannah over there at his office would respond, just pretty generic response. I've dealt with them in a bunch of other issues from sidewalk disrepair to, safe crossings at schools and all other issues. But yeah, this is just one that they are super hands off and they just would not touch. They give you no response and just, they knew what was going on over there. They knew how bad it was getting. And even, their office must have been closed during COVID because nobody was there for a while. And even, their building there went unchecked. And, we saw with the email that came out from Hannah when she had to go back to work and she saw what the conditions were over there. She wasn't happy with that. So, I mean, that just shows you we've been complaining to them and telling them for a full year how bad it's getting and we need something done over there. And, he'd put out these press releases and say, hey, we're going to allow safe camping and we're going to have security over there and we're going to have facilities. None of that's there. There's no security whatsoever. So, that's what's really upsetting to me, and just the hypocrisy of, her coming back to work and seeing the conditions and, trying to get a homeless person removed from her front door. It's like, welcome to our world. That's the world that we're actually living in, and they're not.
Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today, for being so candid. And again, as your neighbor to the north here from Venice Beach, please know that my sympathy goes out to you and your family. And I hope to see you sometime downtown in October, where we're both at the victory parade for those Los Angeles Dodgers.
Agreed. Thank you very much. And, neighbors to the north, I feel like it's Game of Thrones right now. Winter is coming, it's scary. So I feel for you guys. I know how bad it is up there. I know how bad it is in Mar Vista. I know how bad it is in a lot of places. So, we all got to get together and take our city back because, it's not lost yet, but it's getting slim.
Yeah, there you are. Okay, great. Listen, thanks so much for coming out on our first volume of the Recall Mike show. We're putting the spotlight on Westchester a little bit with you and one of your neighbors talking about the park. You've lived there for a few years, I understand.
I've been in Westchester for 23 years now.
Right. And were you involved with their police force too, or was that?
I spent 20 years with LAPD, yep, and then I retired, and I've been retired now for 28 years, but I've still been working with policemen for the last 28 years.
In a different capacity. So,
yeah.
So because so much in these last months, we see the equation being made between homelessness and crime, given the nature of some of the people that are on our streets. I mean, one of the things we have learned, and all of us know, is not every homeless person has the same story.
Right.
But certainly some of them there are drug addicted and are being preyed upon and prey upon others. It's a vicious cycle. You know something about drug addiction too, don't you, my friend?
Yeah. When I started on the police department, I went undercover in the high schools. I was with the first group to go undercover as a high school student. 21 Jump Street actually came out of our first group that came out of there. And then I went to the DARE program shortly after that. So I've spent 17 of my 20 years working with youth in law enforcement.
And DARE stood for DARE
Drug abuse resistance education. Right.
And did you certainly when you were starting with that, one of the drugs you probably would have never have even considered talking about was fentanyl, because it wasn't even there. Now I understand that's a major street drug around our homeless communities. Do you hear the same thing?
Fentanyl and meth, the two big drugs, are easy to get a hold of, and they're all involved with that.
So we have 15 council districts. Does that mean that's how it is in all 15, or just us here in CD 11?
Well, I was down at the down at police headquarters downtown, and they're just camped out there. There's tents everywhere surrounding the police academy. You're looking at a picture right now of our police academy, which is on the left side there, that building. And if you look down the street, you'll see a whole bunch of motorhomes parked there. Most of them will not run, but they continue to have them on the street. In fact, as I passed by to take a couple pictures yesterday, they were out there playing basketball and waving at me, knowing that I could do nothing about the fact that they were living there. And they've been there for over a year. And they're also repairing automobiles as they do there. They've been doing that for quite some time. So it's a whole community on the street where, the other thing I didn't mention to you, when I talked to the senior lead officer over West LA, he said he had to call waste management to have them come up and pick up the trash that these people leave on their sidewalks. So they're just, God, you and I both know we pay for trash pickup, we pay for everything, and the city allows them to have all of that handed to them.
Oh, so you've seen a great deal more, trash and filth on your streets because of these RVs? They just throw them out?
Yeah, they put them in bags, or sometimes they're just laying there. But what's interesting on these RVs, there is an ADA restriction that 1/3 of the sidewalk must be left open for pedestrians. Now, these people who live in these homes, they pull all their stuff out of the sidewalk at night and put them in the trailers. In the morning, they just load them out there, and their chairs, their barbecues, everything are out on the sidewalk, blocking the whole sidewalk. So they're just ignoring the ADA restrictions as well.
Do you have how do you see the problem changing? How do you see it? Do they have create some designated areas for people to park their vehicles?
I think that's where our community leaders are failing us, because they don't do anything about it. They've just turned their head and they think, it'll just go away. It's not going away because of our open policy as far as homeless people here in California. According to a law enforcement person I spoke to, 50% of these homeless people are coming from out of state now. So it just gets more and more crowded because, as you and I both know, Chuck, this is the best weather in all of the United States, and they're taking advantage of it for free.
Yeah, well, maybe you said 50%. I know here in Venice, we get 75, 80%.
From out of state?
From out of state. That's what I've been told and confirmed by a few different people.
Yeah.
We've also been told something that I don't think is a news article really good by our friend Chris LeGray, who was writing for the All Aspect Report, that when they were clearing out Oceanfront Walk, many of the people who were told they had to leave ended up at Westchester Park.
Well, yeah, we have a problem with Mr. Bonin. I think he's just turning a blind eye. He says, he said to us, if you have a better solution, you tell me. Well, I think there was some area that they could move some of the homeless people to where it was out of the way. We can't end the problem, but we can certainly control the problem and put it in an area where they can be, fed, cared after, even given some security. I noticed in Long Beach, and I was kind of impressed. Somebody had donated an old parking lot that wasn't being used. They fenced it. They let the people come in and put their tents up. They had a security guard there, and it was a safe location for them to live, and it was out of the way. So they didn't have beachfront property or lakefront property or next to the barbecue at the parks. They had a place where they could live safely with their tents, with their own property. And it seemed like a reasonable solution to me.
Well, unfortunately, Long Beach is not in the 11th Council District of Los Angeles, but it does to me too. Well, listen, Scott, thank you so much for taking some time today and coming on. And any issues, anything that you find out going on or anything you want to share, whether about actually gathering petitions or just issues all around, you know you're always welcome on the Recall Mike Show.
Appreciate that, Chuck. And we do have petitions going around right now to recall Bonin. And I must tell you, I read the petition. I know it was presented to the city clerk and it made a lot of sense. And then I read Bonin's response to it, which he said that some attorney in Orange County is starting this whole thing, which is an absolute lie. In fact, most of the people that I've talked to voted for Bonin, and they're very liberal, or and they just need him out because he's not doing the job that he promised us.
He's just not. One of the things about, I say this to all the guests that we have on, and this is just that the point of the Recall Mike Show is to begin to change this city to try to make it post-partisan. I really don't care when it comes to matters pertaining to our city governance what your political orientation is. What I do care about is, can you get the jobs done? Can you take care of the constituents? And can you care about us?
Right.
The lives that we lead, those who have, like ourselves, who've been around the block a few times, and the children who are coming up. Someone's got to take care of us.
Yeah, you're right. This is not a political decision. This is a decision for someone to get the job done.
Yeah. So what happened was, I started, because everybody was locked up and a lot of people were bitching and whining on Nextdoor and Facebook and stuff. I started connecting with neighbors I'd never met before, and everybody was, you see it. It's still happening now. People are jumping onto these platforms, going, "What's this mess?" And then people start talking about it. So I met with a few neighbors who live around Bridge Housing, and we were discussing things that could be done, and we were writing letters to Bonin, and we were talking to his assistant, who left, Nisa. Before her was Allison, then it was Nisa, and now it's Dexter, who's the assistant for the bridge, saying, "Look, this is crazy. You guys need to do something. There's a lot of crime. There's crazy vagrancy. There's a lot of violence." And we were all discussing, and I'm sure you've seen there are a lot of theories out there, especially from people who are just fed up and say, just load them all up in a truck and ship them out to the desert, and all kinds of ridiculousness. And that's not a solution. And I said to my neighbors, I said, why, instead of everybody coming up with solutions and bitching and moaning amongst themselves, why doesn't anybody go down and talk to the homeless people and ask them what they think? Are they getting helped? Because we're spending a lot of money and it doesn't seem like anybody's getting help. So that's what we started doing. Probably as COVID started going down in March or so, we started venturing out there as people started getting vaccinated, and the fire department was going down there offering vaccinations to the homeless people down there, as well as in Bridge Housing. We just started walking around and talking to people, just going, "Hey, we're your neighbors. We want to know what's going on with you. Have you been offered help? Has anybody offered you housing? Are you interested in housing?" And so we started doing that, and then we started reporting to Bonin, through Dexter, first through Nisa and also through Dexter. And some of my neighbors also started contacting Parks and Rec, Beaches and Harbors, LA Sanitation, LAPD, and getting on meetings and that sort of stuff. And I started counting tents, and some of my neighbors started counting tents. And basically they were reporting to them saying, well, we see this many tents, and what's going on? We found out that St. Joseph's has the exclusive contract to provide services for the homeless. We noticed that LASA was just driving through in the SUVs, handing out ready-made meals and water, not doing really any servicing. They were making excuses that, well, it's COVID and we can't do anything. And we said, well, these people are all getting vaccinated. Why are you not helping get them into housing? Bridge Housing they kept claiming there was 100 people in there out of 154. I counted what I could see, because I see it every day. I noticed the same faces almost every day. And to me, there was about 50 or 60 people in there. That has changed now. The St. Joseph started going down. And I know that some of the people I work with came up with a plan to start in June, which they did called Connect to Services. They said, hey, St. Joseph's, you guys need to actually talk to these people and offer them service. So why don't we set up a table and just say, hey, come down here. If you're interested in talking to a service provider, we'll connect you with them. If you're interested in housing, we can connect you with that. If you're interested in just charging your phone, we have a charging center. If you want to talk to mental health, if you want to talk to whatever. So that started in the beginning of June. It was Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday from 9 in the morning to like 1 in the afternoon or so. And coincidentally, Joe Buscaino, who's running for mayor, came down and spoke that day, the very first day we started. And you know, it was a pretty interesting show. And then the sheriff came down too. We didn't know about that. We didn't know about any of this plan. So all these things sort of coalesced at the same time. And I think it, you know, how it happened, coincidence, whatever, I don't know. Obviously, Villanueva is taking advantage of a political situation, as politicians do. He's got his problems. A lot of them have been documented. But hey, I think it was a good kick in the ass to the council member. He came down and called him out and said, do something about this, which is what we've been saying. Help these people. Help them get into shelter. Help them put people into the bridge housing. You built it for that. Why isn't it full? We kept saying that and asking these questions, and finally things started happening. So yeah, to the credit of everyone, I've seen St. Joseph out there working their asses off, and I give them all the credit in the world. It's not an easy job. I totally understand that. Super complicated problem. We talked to several people and helped push them into accepting housing, including the 75-year-old rabbi, Miguel, who was living down there, and several other guys that were older. And some of them are living in Bridge now. Ones that I recognize that I've talked to on the boardwalk, they're now living in Bridge housing, or they've moved into Project Room Key, and that's great. And so I'd say about 75% of the people that were on the boardwalk have been moved into temporary housing. The problem.
So this is the prime example, and you are the embodiment of citizen activism, grassroots. You weren't employed to be there. You were looking out for your neighbor. You're doing all these extra things. You are the squeaky wheel. You're the people who made it. Finally, look at what's going on here as crime was literally bursting into fires day after day. My question is has the councilman ever thanked you for any of your efforts?
No, and I don't need his thanks. And in fact, he doesn't even acknowledge us. He basically takes credit for everything, which is fine. I mean, the whole plan of zones that he has, that was something that my neighbor came up with. She basically broke it down into zones, and she said to them, why don't you just work in zones? Go first from this block to this block. That'll be one zone. And then we counted in zones. And so he took that and took it all as his plan. I don't really care. I don't give a shit who gets credit. All I give a shit is that people are getting help. Because when we were talking to them, most of them said, no, I haven't been talked to, or I have, and I filled out the paperwork, and it's really complicated, and then I don't hear anything from anybody. And they get frustrated and disillusioned, which I completely understand. You know, the biggest problem for me, though, is all these plans ignore the people that are mentally unstable, that have drug addiction, that are what they call housing resistant, which housing advocates deny exists. But I've talked to them and I say, what are you going to do about the people who say, screw you, I'm not interested, I don't want to go anywhere with rules? And they say, well, we just keep talking to them until they change their mind. And I'm all, some of these people are violent. Some of these people you can't have a conversation with. What do you do about them? Well, we just keep talking to them until they change their mind. I'm all, there are some people that probably need to be institutionalized and put on meds because you can't, they're walking around and they're in danger of hurting themselves or hurting other people, and you're not doing anything. And I know people are talking about, you know, putting more money into mental health, and there was a ballot initiative, I think it was Prop H or Measure H, wasn't a ballot initiative.
Yes, right.
To raise money for mental health services. And from what I've seen and read and been told, there's been the county, which runs the mental health service, has been sitting on close to $1 billion for several years. They're not building new beds. I've talked to some of the mental health guys down in Rose Avenue parking lot, and I said, I know a woman who was gang raped, I was told, by one of the homeless people and I've seen her on the boardwalk for months. And you can't have a conversation with her. She's not in the same world we are. And there's numerous people like that. She's being abused, physically assaulted. Why aren't you guys doing something to get her off of the streets? Because she needs help. And they said, we can't help someone unless they ask for it. And I'm all, what if they're not capable of asking?
Well, Sean, this, what's wonderful about doing this recall show is when conversations shift in ways you're not 100% expecting. And so we're going to have a feature that will be every week when we do this, and it's called Hometown Heroes. And you're the first one, my friend. I want to thank you very much for the work you do and what you've done. And keep us posted, will you? What's going on in Oceanfront Walk, and we'll bring you back.
Yeah, I mean, look. I'm no hero. I just saw a need and wanted to help. I'm tired of, people on different political agendas trying to drive the narrative and claiming they represent, the homeless. They don't. I don't. The homeless represent themselves. Go talk to them. Everybody's got a unique story, and they need help, and they should get help. But our government is failing, and we need to hold them accountable. And the best way to do that is go out and vote. Mike Bonin was elected with less than 10% of the registered voters in our district. It's ridiculous. We can defeat these people and put people in who are actually going to do something to help fix these problems. That's the biggest problem. Everyone can do that. Everyone can go out and vote.
So we all can be hometown heroes. All right. Well, Philip, it looks like it's you and I. We're starting off this the Recall Mike show.
Thanks for having me, Chuck. Appreciate it.
Next 4 months, man. We'll see if we can get 27,000 signatures, huh?
Absolutely. I think we're going to do it.
And there's so much. It's first of all such a big district. We have so many different jurisdictions, yeah. And one of the things that we're really concerned on, of course, is that not to make this Venice Beach versus the world. But of course, some of the topics that end up coming up are about specifically Venice Beach, because let's face it, for the last 7 years that Mike Bonin has been our city councilman, we've been kind of a cautionary tale. What happens when you're not represented? What happens when your councilman doesn't like some of the residents and doesn't really want their advice or counsel on how to deal with some of our local problems and issues? You and your wife, you guys, just to get a little background, you guys live in a part of Venice Beach near Penmar Park, the golf course, right?
That's right. It's called East Venice, I guess, right by the Rose Penmar area.
And you had some influence there, actually getting it. Some of your transient residents moved.
We had an encampment that grew to almost 80 large tents that were there for maybe 6 to 9 months or so, and it was a group of close neighbors got together, and we formed a group, and we just basically bombarded the city. Requested audience with our city councilman, requested any official who would listen, the fire department, the county, the city, the state, anybody we possibly could, we contacted.
And how did you finally get breakthrough? We've been told that sometimes Mike Bonin doesn't return his phone calls.
Yeah, ultimately on our street, on Rose Avenue, we had 3 RVs literally explode and burst into flames within about an 8-week period. We had a major fire along the border of the golf course, which set a couple of very large trees on fire and burned a number of encampments. And then we had a brutal, horrible attack of this woman right across the street from where we lived that resulted in the guy actually setting her tent on fire with her in it. But she wasn't injured in the fire, but it was just a horrific set of events within a very short period of time that finally got the attention of our councilman.
Yeah, I mean, while you were speaking, the word horrific is the one that came across my mind as well. And you guys have children, right? Small children.
Yeah, we have a 7 and 10-year-old, and they have been traumatized, just like we have as residents of the city, of having to deal with a lot of the things that most people just don't see in the encampments because they don't live by it. And I think that's part of the issue, is that we have such a large district, 300,000 people in CD11. And with those 300,000 people, most people don't live within arm's throw of a major encampment where there's literally a community formed, and there's just daily drug dealing, daily fires, daily fights, daily screaming, yelling, mental health breakdowns, and actually observing closely exactly what's happening in these. Most people just don't see. They see the other side of it. Some poor guy needs some water, needs some help, and there's lots of people who need some help, but they don't see the other side at 4 a.m. and what's going on outside their window.
So here's a question that people ask all the time: when you get them moved out, like you had a group of people in tents, and they finally left the Penmar Park, the East Venice, where do they go?
Well, from what we understand, Mike Bonin implemented his pilot project called Encampments to Homes, and he engaged St. Joseph's, the nonprofit who's well established in Venice, and they did a absolutely fantastic job of planning and then implementing, getting people to vacate the area. And it was over a period of about 6 weeks. They broke it down into zones, much like they're doing in OFW. It's sort of a pilot for what happened at OFW. We weren't told where they were going to be placed. We had no communication from the council on what was going to happen to them. We just sort of vaguely heard that they went to some hotel over on Sepulveda somewhere, but we weren't involved with that at all. And really, at that time, at that moment, we were just glad to see our environment change dramatically and allow children and elderly people who used to frequent our neighborhood walking down the sidewalk feel safe again to walk down the sidewalk. That was the result of it. So at that point, we were just glad to see everything change and return to normal. Of course, it's been fenced off since then, right? So we've had a fence down, the 3/4 of a mile or so along Rose Avenue. It has a fence that has, and we've had multiple times where the signs have been taken down, where we've had break-ins into the fence that we've had to go out and repair. We've done cleanups behind the fence because people just dump a lot of trash. But we've had lots of people say they're going to come back as soon as that fence is down.
Well, it's really inspirational what you guys did, and I'm really glad the community banded together.
Yeah, we did.
The interesting thing is when you say, well, we don't really know where they went. They've had a cleanup on Oceanfront Walk, and an interesting news story came out of there written by Chris LeGray, who, by the way, is also going to be a segment on our first podcast this week, and he found out that a few of the people who were there on Oceanfront Walk were now in Westchester Park.
Yeah.
We're in Santa Monica. We're up by Ocean Park. So we have just because you can clear out of an area like Oceanfront Walk, it's not clear wherever anybody goes. There's a lot of confusion about that, right?
Yeah. Well, unless the laws are equally enforced, unless there's equal enforcement everywhere, people will just pop up somewhere else. Ultimately, what we found from observing what was happening across the street is most people just want to be left alone. They just want to be left alone and not hassled. And any kind of hassling causes all kinds of, sometimes outrage reaction from them. But they just really want to be left alone to do whatever the hell they want. And it's going to require, in order for this issue to be solved, where we have encampments popping up everywhere, it's going to require equal enforcement of the laws on the books at every location. And it's going to require a leadership in order to do that.
Christopher, how are you? Good to see you.
Doing good, Charles. How are you, man?
Good. Thanks for coming out. So you've been driving around the canyons, I understand.
Well, I went for a hike over the weekend up in Malibu with the Mutts, and in light of the fire up in Topanga last week, I think it was on Tuesday, which we don't have a whole lot of detail, but based on what we were able to tell from the news footage and some of the Forestry Service cameras, is it started behind. It looks like a permanent dwelling, but it's a trailer in this very sort of remote area behind that dwelling. Certainly raises questions. But that aside, after my hike, I just took a little time and kind of drove up along some of those really more remote areas. And it's funny, people think Malibu, the rich and the famous, and it certainly is, but there's also a lot of really wild country up there, as we learned through, the fire a few years ago. And as I was on Latigo Canyon Road, which really climbs way up into the mountains, kind of a little bit north of Pepperdine, there were 2 or 3 encampments right there on the road, people in cars, minivans who had set up, and I'm telling you what you know, Charles, we're familiar enough with the dynamics of this population now that somebody stopping to have a sandwich from somebody who's dug in. And they were set up, a couple of them had their generators. And if you have that picture that I sent to, and the irony of this picture is, Charles, you can see up on the hillside, some of those trees, they're still blackened and charred from the Thomas fire 3 years ago, or 2018, which was, of course, the largest fire in Southern California history. And it burned simultaneously with the campfire up in Paradise. And I didn't realize this. I was digging into it a few weeks ago for a story I was working on. Those 2 fires, Charles, started within 24 hours of each other. The 2 largest wildfires in recorded California history burned simultaneously. And it was a harbinger of things to come because resources were so stretched. We sent folks up to Paradise to help with that fire, which stretched our folks down here thin. So to then, in light of all of that, see people back up there camping out, who knows, what sorts of activities. I mean, we're one cigarette.
So all these forces coming together like this, do the canyons that, that are a little more in CD11, the Temescal or coming off of where the Village Highlands is, or up in whatever in the mountains there, are those canyons at the same kind of risk because they conceivably have the same kind of guys camping out?
Absolutely. And, even more risk because the population, you're talking like Palisades, Highlands, places like that is obviously denser. And we haven't had a fire in that area. The one sort of benefit up north of CD11 is that we had the fire. So the next one won't be, as bad, which by the way, is the way nature intends it. Amongst many other issues we can get into down the road is how we've sort of made a mess of the natural order of things when it comes to fire. But back to the Palisades and CD11, I mean, the fact that we know and we have firsthand accounts from neighbors, we have the LAPD surveillance video from the fire in the Palisades Highlands, which was intentionally started by a homeless individual who was known to the community. I believe he had been arrested a couple of times before. I'm not entirely sure, but he was known to the community and intentionally set fires. And there are many people living up there. There was a fire on PCH in the Palisades Bluffs. I think that was about a month ago. That was started by an illegal encampment. And you saw for a week or so after, LAFD was up there doing patrols. But again, this
all goes also down through the Santa Monica Mountains. I mean, are we talking the same all the way to the Sepulveda Pass? Really, in the nature of where they're canyons, where they're...
Well, I mean, all we have to do is follow the fires that have already happened, right, Charles? I mean, we've had actually 2 in Sepulveda Pass. We both know, started by homeless encampments. We've had, 2 in the Palisades just in the last year. So the evidence is everywhere. I've spoken to, or if anyone were to just go into your local, fire station, the firefighters will tell you that they are putting out multiple homeless fires per day. I talked to a crew in CD11. I don't want to identify him, but it was CD11. And this was just a few months ago. And I, just wandered into the station because I had a cup of coffee in a few minutes. And I said, just curious, guys, how many calls have you had today? And they said 8. How many of those, or I asked them how many fire calls. They said 8. Oh, on a single Sunday, that seems like a lot. How many were homeless related? I said, all of them. And this was 5 p.m. on a Sunday during COVID when the rest of us were at home. 8 homeless fires in a day. So we are quite literally playing Russian roulette with CD11. And every encampment, every little area of homelessness has its own dynamics, its own social structures, its own hierarchies. I mean, if you talk to folks, for example, at Rose, they know which camp to go to get which drugs, to get which services, to get your bike fixed, what have you. So there's almost like this civilization evolving right before our very eyes. And unfortunately, it's built upon the backs of societies, normal societies, most vulnerable. And that's how what we've come to call the homeless industrial complex, which is enabled by, certain elected officials sustains itself. So what happened at the boardwalk was almost inevitable. You know, when you let something progress that far, when you have that concentration, and I would wager that it's almost historically unprecedented. It's like we're conducting some, you know, horrific social experiment on these people. I mean, think of another time in history when, particularly in a, you know, otherwise theoretically advanced society, we allowed this congregation of mental illness, physical illness, abuse, crime, addiction. I mean, just go down the list of ways to destroy a human being and then concentrate it like dark matter on a beach where everybody has every incentive to stay and to continue coming. And then we're surprised at the results. And this, you know, alleged cleanup over the last few weeks, you know, we interviewed some of the folks who just simply picked up and moved to Westchester Park. I've spoken to some folks here in Santa Monica who just moved, and they're more than happy to move back when the crowd moves on. So unless and until we start treating it like an actual humanitarian crisis, we're just going to keep playing whack-a-mole, and lots of people are going to keep dying.
Just want to thank you, Chris, for coming back and seeing
so
us.
much,
And we'll see you again real soon.
Appreciate it, Charles. Take care.
So here we are. We're out here with Oz King, who is really one of the stellar signature gatherers, and we wanted to know how she did it in this first week, and how are people responding? And
well, I've gotten 91 signatures in a week, and it's persistence. You just have to get the right location. Farmers markets are good. This is a good place because everyone goes to the post office. We're at the post office, and I understand they've asked you to be up here on the sidewalk now. Yeah, they've kicked me off of being next to the door, which I wasn't that close to the door. But when I said this is public property, this is the post office, and they said no, so I came over here, and they tried to kick me off the sidewalk, and she took a picture of me.
Oh no!
Yeah, she took a picture of me.
But how do you prevail upon the people to sign, or are they willing? Are they needing persuasion?
I don't do a heavy. I don't do a heavy-handed pitch. I say, you know, recall petitions for Mike Bonin, and if they're engaged, they'll come over. If not, you know, I don't want to make enemies, you know, behind this recall effort. So the key words are recall Mike Bonin. Yeah. So that's what we have to do, and we're going to be in. So thank you so much for talking to us. You're welcome. And back to the show.
All right.
So, you know, you're looking at this, you're looking at an encampment, you're looking at a scene where people are living, and you might think this is Venice Beach. Well, it's not. This is actually Mar Vista Park. It could be Westchester Park. It could be, it could be anywhere in CD11, really. But I bring this one up and wanted to show this one to everybody today, and to you, Pete, because that was put up there by the folks who are doing Recall Bonin, and the response of somebody who knows that park says, well, hey, we think the councilman's doing a great job. And he said, well, what about all this trash? And they said, well, you know, it's because the city won't send us a dumpster because, you know, to prevent this. And we're going, well, that seems like failure to us. And their response to this person, it's just a conversation on Twitter, well, it just proves that you hate people. You hate poor people. And then what happens is New York Magazine, through something called Cœur de LA, publishes that really amounts to disinformation about what's going on, and says that anybody who's against any permanent supportive housing project in Venice are segregationists because they don't want anybody, poor people, to be around. So we would be called haters, right? We've been called segregationists, and we have been called, those of us who would like to see a new councilman put in place, have been called that we are all Trump supporters. I'm here today to introduce myself to those of you on the be watching the Recall Mike show, to realize I'm a native of Los Angeles. I'm a senior citizen. I'm retired, and I have only voted once for a Republican in my life. It was for mayor. It's for Richard Riordan. What we're doing here in the recall of Mike Bonin is to look at a city that can be post-partisan, that can be bipartisan. The people who are doing Recall Bonin, they are a bipartisan group, fueled mostly by Democrats, who are just really tired looking at the way our city looks. So I'm tired of the name calling, and I refuse to buy that. And this is the reason why we felt so strongly that we had to do some kind of podcast, so that we could not be demonized, that you would see who the normal people are, and you know, living in CD11, who want to express themselves. And in fact, if you sign any recall petition or you're a volunteer, we want you on this podcast,
right,
on this show, to talk about, you know, what motivated you to do this. And in fact, we're very generous here. If you strongly disagree with us, come on, talk to us about it. Why we're wrong, what we're missing in the 7 years that we've watched our situations on the streets get worse, and that we have been ignored and rebuffed. At least here in Venice, California, we are the cautionary tale for CD11, and we need your help. We need to get better representation and do the leadership, and we're going to do it in a post-partisan, bipartisan way. And with that, I'll sign off. Let's get back to Darren.
All right, that was very interesting. I think that's a great point to make. I think that people may believe what they read, that we're all Trump supporters, which is not the case at all.
No, we're bipartisan. You know, we're just, and by the way, we got to, as I said, we got to move to a post-partisan. We can't be, what team do you play for? And the hope is, here we are in California, let's break a trend. Let's start some trends here. Let's get representatives who really care about their district and are there and are in constant consult with the people, and don't see people who disagree with them as enemies.
Yeah, they want to hear their opinion. They want to, you know, people can change their mind. They can grow from when their constituents can bring them information that maybe they weren't aware of, but at least talk to the people that you represent.
Well, we'll be talking to the people he represents. So remember, this is your show. It's the Recall Mike show, and Darren and I'll see you next time.